Tiago Garcez, that is a consultant, a trainer, a coach, a facilitator. So he will talk a little bit about himself, and he will talk to us about how not to scale Agile. And he will provide us with a distinct perspective, the via negativa.
Okay, thank you very much. So my name is Tiago Garcez. I'm an Agile coach and trainer. Like we said, I work with organizations of all sizes. I'm originally from Brazil. I left Brazil when I was 17. I've been in Europe now for 20 years. I'm currently based in Belgium, and I only have 20 minutes, so that's all I'm going to say about myself. Okay, so I want to talk today about how not to scale Agile. And I'm going to start that by talking about Fluffy. Fluffy is a border collie, and she loves one thing. She loves frisbees. And so when you take Fluffy out to the garden, and she's looking straight at you all the time with her attention focused on the frisbee, you throw the frisbee, she goes chasing it, and she catches it in the air. She brings it back to you, drops it on your foot, looking at you again, very happy, waiting for you to throw the frisbee again. You keep throwing the frisbee for an hour, and she keeps catching it, right? Now, the question is, how does she do that? Because actually catching that frisbee involves a lot, well, there are a lot of factors at play. There's two options here. Is Fluffy a genius? When you throw the frisbee, is she talking about the nose angle, calculating the wind resistance, thinking about the velocity of the throw, gravity? No. Actually, what she's doing is, she's just following a simple rule. She's going to run at a speed that keeps the angle between her and the frisbee constant. And when the frisbee is low enough, she jumps and catches it. Okay? Keep it simple. Now you see this happen in other cases in nature also. Some more extreme cases. Think about gazelles in Africa, right? They have to escape from their predators. A lion is a big one. So how do gazelles do it? Well, simple rule. You see a lion, you run. That's a heuristic keeping them alive for a long time. Imagine a clever gazelle. When she sees a lion, she starts thinking about, okay, I have a function here that I need to process. How hungry is the lion? How fast can the lion run? What's the size of the pack? You know what the lion calls the clever gazelle? Lunch, right? Now between the two, the lion run gazelle and the clever gazelle, the difference is exactly that. The gazelle following the simple practices is a proud mother of 6, and they continue to exist today. The clever gazelle is extinct. What I'm proposing here today is that Agile organizations, when you're talking about scaling Agile, they're doing the same thing. They're following simple rules, simple heuristics that enable them to catch the frisbee, to catch an opportunity before it disappears. If they stay there for a long time thinking about, okay, what's going to happen with the market, what's going to happen with the customers, by the time they do something about it, the opportunity is gone. Okay? And so we're talking about heuristics here. And heuristics are basically, they're experience-based techniques that are good enough to solve a problem. They're not perfect. They're good enough. Okay? And there's a lot of room left over there. And if you think about it, what is the Agile Manifesto? It's essentially heuristics for developing complex products, right? It's a very simple document. It takes about a minute to read it. But there are a lot of gaps in here. But the point is, it's just talking about heuristics that we use to develop complex products. And this worked very well at the team level in organizations, right? People started using Agile, and teams started delivering value. Everybody could see the benefits of Agile. So then came the next wave, which is, this is great. So Agile talks about the team. How can we scale Agile across the organization? And the problem there is that this is too complex a problem to solve. And we try to fill in those gaps that exist in those heuristics by creating more processes, right? And you have the emergence of things like SAFe and LESS and DAD. And I'm not here to do any SAFe bashing or anything like that. So if that's what you're expecting, I'm sorry to disappoint. But the point here is you cannot predict ahead of time how you're going to scale agility around your company. It's too complex a problem. So what I'm proposing here today is to take a different approach, a via negativa approach. Via negativa is originally a theological thing. It's talking about we can't understand what God is. We can't define God. So let's try to talk about what God is not. And maybe by doing that, we can get closer to the truth. Okay? And it's a concept that became popular again by Nassim Taleb. He wrote The Black Swan, Anti-Fragile, for people that are familiar with that. And he talks about how the idea of via negativa, the idea of removing things, the idea of omission, is a robust idea. It's not fragile. Exactly because when you remove things, you're not having side effects and unintended chains of consequences. Therefore, it's more robust. Okay? And he also makes the point, of course, that consultants make money by adding stuff, not by removing stuff usually. So, without further ado, let's talk about some scaling heuristics via negativa style. What are some things that we maybe should remove from organizations if we really are serious about scaling Agile? And my intention here is to challenge you guys also to think a bit. Some of these things might seem counterintuitive at first. I hope not, but we'll see. Stop doing projects, okay? Projects are finite games, okay? A finite game is something with an ending. And finite games encourage short-term thinking. If you think about it, like a marathon is a finite game. And I can run a marathon as hard as I can, and I finish in first place and I cross the finish line. And I have a heart attack 10 seconds afterwards. I still won the marathon, but they get to bury me with a trophy, right? I'm no longer alive. That's not what companies are doing. Companies are like the gazelle. They're in a long-term game. We're in a game of survival. We don't need short-term thinking. We need long-term thinking. We need companies thinking about products, thinking about how they're earning money. Projects are an instrument we use to try to manage that, but they're not very effective because they're finite games. They prohibit this long-term thinking. Projects also breed politics. For anybody working in large organizations, you're probably familiar with how the budget cycle works for projects, and at the end of the year, they're defining the budgets for what they're going to do next year, and there's always like the projects that get the big budgets, and those are the important projects. And I've been doing this for a while. I've never seen a big project get canceled early on because they realize what they're doing is not valuable. Once the budget is there, the rock is moving, right? And it's like, my precious, I need to protect it, okay? And then people start focusing on internal expectations. They lose track of value because the budget was given for the project with specific constraints or objectives. So stop doing projects. Start focusing on products, on your value streams. Second thing, stop doing resource planning. By resource planning, I mean it's the game the managers like to play, right? So you have your projects and then they want estimates for it. And then they start doing the thing, okay, so now Mary is going to be on this project for 2 months and Joan's going to go over there for 3 months and then I'm going to switch them around. Resource planning is crack for managers. It's a very, like, if you think about it, if I have all the estimates for all the project work that has to be done, it's a very interesting puzzle to try to solve. Problem is, it's not really valuable. It's not really the way work gets delivered. You need to focus on growing teams instead. That's hard to do, and it takes time. But that's a much more valuable and sustainable way to work. Stop focusing on individuals, stop focusing on resource planning and moving people around, and start growing teams. It takes time for teams to grow. I always use the metaphor in companies. Imagine if we did that like with, Barcelona or Real Madrid or one of the big football clubs. And every 2 months you change the team and put new people in. They'd never win anything. It's normal. Teams take time to grow. Third thing, don't focus on efficiency. This is a big thing with managers. I heard at the keynote of the Scrum Gathering in New Orleans last year, Ken Rubin gave a very good example, which I like, which is the relay race. So in the relay race on the Olympics, basically, the objective is to get the baton around the track, right? And you have usually 4 runners that take in turns using it. A manager focused on efficiency looks at this race and says, hold on, the 4th runner, he's just sitting there for 75% of the time doing nothing. So I'm going to take him and I'm going to put him in another race in the meantime. And then the 3rd runner also, he's not doing anything for the moment, so I'm going to make him do something else. Okay? Efficiency doesn't really matter. What you want to focus on is effectiveness. You want to focus on the baton. You almost don't care about the runners, you care about how fast the baton is going around the track. And you want to start asking questions, why is it slowing down? Why is the handover difficult? Why is this happening? Focus on the baton. Don't focus on the efficiency of the people. Don't forget the user. Now, this sounds like a typical marketing maxim, right? The user is king or something like that. But what I mean here is the user is bigger than the customer. And there's a difference here. The customer is how is who pays your bills. The user is who uses your product. A lot of times when companies start doing Scrum, they'll say things like, oh, okay, we have a product owner identified, and this team is doing sprints and they're doing Scrum, and the product owner is accepting the stories and everything is going great. Trouble is the product owner is just the guy with the budget. He's not the actual user, okay? If the product owner is happy, does not mean that you have a valuable product. You need to focus on the user. And also, if you think about it in some other perspectives for companies, like Facebook, for example, they struggle with this concept also. They don't make their money from the users mostly, okay? But they can't make a platform that's bad for the users. If not, they lose users and they can't make money from advertising. The user is the only source of true competitive advantage. And if you want to scale agility, you need to always focus on the user, always focus on delivering value for the users. Next one. Don't scale technical incompetence. I've seen this sometimes also, where companies go, okay, Agile is working, we want to scale, we have a lot of projects we want to do, and we need to add like 200 developers now to do all this work. Problem in that is that it takes time to build craftsmen in your company. It takes time to invest in people. You can't just imagine that you can scale up and down easily, even though that's what a lot of partners will promise you. Because it takes time to know the product, it takes time to know the company, the users, the context, all those things. You need to invest in craftsmanship in your organization. You need to take time to build people who are good at what they do. If you scale technical incompetence, it's to make sure you can land before you can fly. You're going to have problems when you try to deliver your projects. And linked to that, stop with the traditional management career paths. What happens nowadays is, what I mean with this is the following. Whether you're a developer, a tester, an analyst, whatever function you have in the team, Scrum Master, eventually your career path in the organization is leading somewhere to a management role. Okay? Keto was talking about this a bit with the distinction between Frederick Taylor's contribution. So we split work between thinking and doing. And eventually, if you get very good at doing, then you should go do thinking. That's clearly not how it works. But why does everybody have to become a manager, right? If you love developing, why do you have to either stop your career path or go become a manager? So what we need to start doing is align careers and craft. So if you have an engineering craft, make the career path there that they can go up that ladder as far as they can. A lot of companies nowadays are starting to do this. So it's not just, I become a developer, then I get very good, I can be an architect, and eventually I can be a manager. Let people, if you want to invest in craftsmanship, you need to also reward people for getting better in that craft. Don't force them into a management role. There is something called the Peter Principle. I'm not sure if people are familiar with it, but essentially it says people get promoted based on how good they do their current job, right? So if I'm doing my job well right now, I get promoted. Then my next job, if I'm doing that job well, I get promoted again. Then when I suck at this job, I don't get promoted anymore. Which means, if you think about it, eventually everybody gets to their level of incompetence in the organization. And you have a bunch of incompetent people running the company, right? This kills agility. You don't want to do that. You want to make people be able to grow within their craft. Don't scale process. And this is maybe my biggest, let's say, in the whole scaling debate, we're conflating two things. We're conflating processes and cultures within the scaling debate. And everybody's focusing on the process part of it. Why did SAFe become so popular, for example? They have that nice big picture, right? Managers always say, it's hard for me to understand Agile and how this is going to work in my organization. SAFe comes with a great picture of how the whole process works. And managers go like, okay, this I can get. I can see this. Trouble is, your culture is going to eat all your processes for breakfast, okay? If your culture in the company doesn't support agility, it doesn't matter how well-defined your Agile processes are, they will never work. And of course, changing culture, growing culture is the hardest thing you can do in an organization, okay? But the process side is easy. Probably everybody in this room can start to draw some process of how agility works at scale. That's not the formula. That's not what we need to do. We need to scale culture. We need to scale things like trust, purpose, collaboration, transparency. Those are the things you want to scale. And if your organization and everybody in your organization starts to align around this, and everybody trusts each other, everybody's collaborating, everybody has a common purpose, then guess what? Your processes almost don't matter, okay? That's why the Scrum framework or Agile frameworks are so simple. There's a lot of holes in there. That's on purpose, okay? We need to scale a culture of collaboration, trust, and purpose. We don't need to scale processes. Processes come afterwards. Don't scale unless you have to. That's a weird thing to say maybe in a scaling presentation, but the problem with scale is it's not natural, okay? There are certain limits to how we interact with each other. There's the Dunbar number for people who know it, right? So we can keep about 150 social interactions at a time. And trying to do things with 20,000 people, there's a reason that's difficult. It's goes against human nature almost, okay? Now, there's good examples of this, like companies like Gore & Associates. It's a classic case study for horizontal organizations. And what they said is, yeah, we realized that once we get past 150 people, things get messy. So what do? Every time a factory gets bigger, every time an office gets bigger than that, they just make another one, okay? And they essentially create small organizations that are within the same group, but they're all independent organizations. So, here's 8 heuristics of things you shouldn't be doing or things we should remove from organizations. Now, the million-dollar question. So what does agility at scale look like, right? All right, everybody ready? I don't know. It depends, and it's going to be different for everybody. That's the point here. When you're scaling culture, every culture is unique. What Agile is giving you is a set of heuristics that are very simple, and there are a lot of gaps there to be filled. And it's up to you to fill that gap in your organization. Nobody can tell you how your organization is going to be when it scales Agile. If they do, that's wrong. That's going to be a top-down imposition. It's not going to work. This needs to be grown for the bottom. Just don't forget the things you shouldn't do. Keep the heuristics in mind. Okay? All right, that was a 40-minute presentation. I managed to do it in 17. Thanks a lot.
Questions? We have time. At least one? No?
So you mentioned that we need to end projects, but what if we want to approve, want to reach a goal and you have to get approval to a specific budget? Do you propose an alternative for that?
Well, I just speak loudly, it's okay. What a lot of companies do with that is say, well, a lot of companies, what some companies are doing with that is saying basically, we're going to release small increments of budget. We're going to release small increments of budget for products. So if you have a product, whatever it is, the mobile app, like I'm working with a bank right now, we're working on the mobile app for the bank. So the mobile app gets 50K. And they get to spend that money, that's going to be about 4 or 5 sprints. And they get to spend that money building the new features they want to build on the app. And of course, once those features are built, it goes to the markets. Then they try to see, okay, are we getting the results we expected? Are we increasing our customer base or whatever it is, the metrics they want to track? If so, you get a bit more investment in your product, okay? But there is the thing that you want to manage the product in your organization, the value streams, and how you make money. And the budget-wise, you want to essentially not commit a huge chunk of budget to a project or a product, but you do small budget increments for product lines, let them spend it, and if they're generating results, maybe that justifies spending more. If they're not generating results, maybe not.
Okay, so that's the project itself, but we are redefining the size of it, right?
But that's the switch in mindset. It's not a project. It's just you have a product which might be built by 1 or more teams. So let's say there's 4 teams building this product, and you just release budgets, small budgets, that these teams build features. And once the budget is over, do we still have value? Do we keep going? But when you start a project, it means also like, you have the whole life cycle of the project, you have the startup phase of the project. Those things are not really necessary. It's just a question of what's next to build, and you keep financing that team until the team doesn't make sense anymore or doesn't bring value anymore to the organization. That's the switch there.
Do you have any tips how to enact cultural change? Not in the entire enterprise, but for a department, for instance?
Yeah, that's probably the million-dollar question. Look, It's a few things. There is some top-down initiatives, I think. I think management from the top has to be involved. I've never seen an agile transition that's bottom-up in a big organization that works, okay? And management has to give some clear signals, which means, you know, if the organization is always, you're judged on, you know, does your project meet your estimates? Saying, okay, guys, we're not going to do that anymore. Now for us, what's important is, are we learning? Are we releasing frequently? You start to stress the values you want to create. And from the ground up, you also need to give people the freedom to start creating their own sets of rules. So things like communities of practice or things like that generally help to start to create a culture of collaboration, a culture of, you know, focus on craftsmanship or focus on products. It's a combination of both, and there's some techniques there, but there is no easy answer for that. Huh? Culture hacking is very difficult, but I think it's having a clear vision from the top, but giving the bottom the freedom to, you know, enact that vision in however they see fit. And make sure you guys agree on, you know, what's valuable and the metrics you're tracking so that...
How do you trigger the top management?
How do you get them to say, we want to do Agile? I don't know. That's the honest question. Like, I've worked in Agile transitions that failed because we didn't have support from upper management. And I've worked in Agile transitions where upper management contacted us. But I've never managed to convince management inside an organization that doesn't believe in it. Because a lot of times what they do is, they say, come in and do Scrum because we heard Scrum makes developers faster, and that's great, you know? And yeah, that's like...
Okay, thank you, Tiago.
Thank you very much.
Well, I hope you enjoyed these two talks as much as I did, and now let's take the coffee break. And then at 5:15, or more or less, we'll be with meals.